Well, that's an interesting question, and there. Let's start with let's say they're the employees, they're the shareholders, and they're the other industry participants, which can really, in the upstream part of the oil and gas business, are not customers, they're really joint ventures. And the problem, of course, is always that the individual hearing the truth cannot assimilate it correctly because of ignorance or lack of attention or whatever, and therefore overreacts. And of course, that's a possible downside. But I think I've always been so wary of rationalizations, excusing deviations from basic ethics, that I said we'll just have to take the possibility of that. Because it's such a slippery slope when you start convincing yourself of deviations from probity, that it gets easier and easier. Because what happens, you say, well, they wouldn't understand that, so I won't tell them that. And that's this quarter. And the next quarter, it'd be slightly larger deviation. And it's just the human mind, my view of the human mind at work is that it can be extremely perverse. So the employees I worried about least. I knew that if they wanted to, if they revealed some of these very sensitive pieces of information, it could hurt us competitively. But then again, we chose people that we firmly believed were upright, solid citizens. Then when it came to the shareholders, for better or worse, it really is true that most of the shareholders, did you meet your estimates? And we actually toyed with showing the shareholders the sort of stuff that we generated internally based on what are called Monte Carlo simulations, where you start to actually end up with a histogram of your expected production in a given year. But we decided that maybe about 1% of the people would understand it, and we'd get calls back saying, oh, so the 50%, so the top part, that's what you're going to have, right? You're going to have that. No, that's what you're going to have, right? And then we'd have to explain, well, that's not really, So we finally gave up trying to have a different approach to disclosure, which I felt would have been more fruitful, and decided we were just going to have no games, but nothing more, no breakthroughs in terms of the degree of information we conveyed to our shareholders. In terms of our joint ventures, our view is we were in it for the long haul. We were a good partner. We expected them to be good partners, and we were always going to tell them the absolute truth because we knew they could analyze things. They would be able to understand what we were saying, and that we picked our partners on a basis that we believed that they would be able to give us their reasoned point of view if they were asked, just as we would if we were asked. So what happens in the oil and gas business, typically there's an operator who takes prime responsibility, and then there's some working interest partners who don't control the actual operations of the well except under extraordinary circumstances. Generally aren't asked their opinions. We tended to talk to ours more than most. And with all three groups, we disclosed as much as we felt we could without sacrificing our competitive position. We didn't disclose where we were headed, what the next trend we were headed toward, but basically we disclosed more than I've ever seen anyone else disclose to people we thought were worthy of listening to it.